friends, welcome to News Summary. And today we'll be talking about the peace in Ukraine. And before we continue, my friends, if you are new to this channel and you have not yet subscribed, please click the subscribe button now, as we will be bringing you contents and news that is happening around the world. So if you want to keep up to date with all the news that is happening, this is a channel of choice. Alright, my friends, before I go back to the Russia-Ukraine war, and you are new here, or you have been following the war, or just want to take you through the background of what happened to where we are today. Alright, so Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland, all the countries around Russia, they were first of all part of the Soviet Union until the Soviet Union collapses, and some countries like the Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, and all the small countries around Russia, they had to declare their own independence. Alright, so after that, Europe and America formed the North Atlantic Treaty, which is NATO. And this military alliance was to protect themselves should in case anybody attack them. An attack on one is an attack on all. Alright, so with this treaty, there was even a time Russia, I don't know if they were serious, but they make it in a statement that they wanted to join NATO, and NATO refuses. And my friends, you know why? Because this treaty was first of all formed to shield them from Russia. And now if Russia wants to join the treaty now, it means that the alliance will lose its value. So my friends, I'm sure that is why they say that Russia cannot join the North Atlantic Treaty. Alright, now Russia then now feel threatened, because Russia know very well that this treaty was formed against them. Alright, now Russia started raising its own security concerns that the NATO is coming too close to Russia and that they must stop. Alright, so this was where the big problem started, and they signed a treaty that NATO would not move an inch close to Russia. Alright, but my friends, over time, NATO keep moving closer and closer and closer to Russia. So that was one of the biggest, one of the origin of the war today. Alright, now till 20. So if you want to look at the time and rulers of Ukraine from when the Soviet Union collapses, because Russians and Ukrainians are more like one people. More Ukrainians speak the Russian language. Alright, so it all started with a piece of land, Crimea, which was originally Russians, but the Russians give that land to Ukraine. As time goes by, and that land had more Russians, up to 70 to 80% of the indigenous of those lands are Russians, and they speak Russian, their culture is still Russian. So the Ukraine government started maltreating those people there. So just like you see small breakaway territories that if they are being marginalized, they call on those that they know that they can help them. So they started calling on Russia to help them, because enough was enough. And given that Crimea was originally Russia, and most of the people there, they speak Russia, their culture is Russia, in fact they are Russians. So Russians deem it necessary to save its people in Crimea, and that is why they launched the incursion in Crimea in 2014. Alright, so after Crimea, you have the Donbass people, then you have the Donetsk and the Luhansk, which are big regions close to Russia, which are equally more of Russians. Alright, so the same thing they were doing to Crimea, it continued. Until these four regions, they have to declare their independence. And the war have been going on between the Donbass People Republic and the Ukraine. Alright, so all of that was manageable until the puppet government, which is Zelensky, decided that they wanted to join NATO, knowing very well that that is impossible because Putin had earlier declared that it's a red line. And at that time, Biden was in power as the president of America. And given their own history, he hated Putin, he hated his ties. So he was not willing to tell Zelensky to give up the NATO dream because Russia will not take it. And Russia declared it that if they do, hate will fall. And that was ignored. And within from 2014 to 2022, the Russians, the Americans were busy heavily militarizing Ukraine, training their forces in such a way that they can be ready for combat missions with Russia. Given this, Russia gave them all the warnings. Russia reminds them of the Minsk Treaty and all the agreements that state that they are not to move an inch close to Russia. And this is what happened. So, given that more military bases were being built up in Ukraine and Russia felt threatened, and Russia said, okay, if this is the case, they are going to carry out a military operation to demilitarize Ukraine. Alright, so in February 2022, they launched that military incursion into Ukraine. And my friends, within 2 days, they were right in Kharkiv. Even though if you listen to the mainstream media today, they will tell you that they could not take Kharkiv, they could not go close to Kharkiv. Alright, so my friends, they were right in Kharkiv. And that was when the negotiations started. Alright, so the Russians and the Ukrainians delegations, they hold a lot of sections to negotiate on what is going to happen. And they come to the terms of that agreement in 2 weeks. So my friends, this was supposed to be the military operation was to end in 2 weeks, but the Ukrainians say that they cannot sign the agreement if the Russians are still in Kharkiv, which is their military, their capital, that it will look like they are putting a gun on their head to sign, that it will not be fair, that Russians should withdraw back so that they'll be able to sign the treaty. Alright, Russians accepted to withdraw back, so they withdraw back all their forces to the border. Then the Prime Minister of UK, which was Boris Johnson at that time, flew down to Ukraine and said that they cannot sign the treaty, that they can win the war in a battle. And given at that time the Americans, which was the Democrat under Joe Biden, they were equally looking for an opportunity to go into fight with Russia. So they equally seized that as an opportunity, and they started pumping all type of weapons so that the Ukrainians will be able to fight back the Russians. And they had different things put in place because they wanted to make Russia a pariah state. They wanted to weaken it financially in such a way that they will not have money to fight any war. Alright, so given all this, that is why they impose Russia with the most stupid sanctions that you see today. Russia is the most heavy sanctioned country in the world with over 24,000 plus sanctions. So they nearly sanction all their sections of economic, the oil, the banks, the schools, everything. They sanction everything Russia. In fact, they even call all their companies that were operating in Russia to leave Russia. And they actually did. Not knowing that Putin is a smart guy. He earlier built Russia to be sanction proof. So they think that they could cripple Russia within months. For the first year, Russian economy grew by 3.2, which all European countries' economic was in a recession. Their economics either grew by 0 point something or they were all on negative, which was a big blow to what the original plan to weaken Russia. And at that time, 70 to 80% of their oil, petrol was coming from Russia. So they make a plan to phase that out, so that because they believe that if they stop buying oil from Russia or if they stop buying gas, then Russia will be broke, because they feel like they were the one foiling the Russian war. Within no time, Russia already work around that, and they have new markets, and they were then selling to India, they were then selling to China, they were selling to Asia. And my friends, most of these people were acting as third parties, because they will still buy the oil from Russia and they'll sell back the gas, they'll sell back the petrol back to Europe. So what they used to buy maybe for a gallon as 60 euro, the price certainly shoots to the roof to 8 euros. And that makes the life of many Europeans hard, and they started to feel the pinch of the war. So for all this time, they have been pouring weapons upon weapons. In fact, they have deployed all types of weapons, thinking that the Ukrainians can fence off back the Russians. But Russians have been on a steady, fast-paced, gaining territories by territories daily. Until last year, that the Ukrainians launched a surprise incursion into Kursk, gaining about 1,000 kilometers square, which is actually the first time a foreign force have actually invaded Russia. And they did so thinking that Russia would take out best of its elite force from Kherson, from Donbass, from other regions, and deploy them in Kursk to fend off. But Russians actually allowed them for a while until Russia launched its offensive, which they drove them out of Russia. So Donald Trump took power, which I personally think, though Donald Trump is not stable, he will say one thing today. In fact, Donald Trump speaks based on how events are unfolding. So you can actually take what he says for his word. But I applaud him because he's the only leader that peace is possible through him, because America has some leverage over Europe. For all these 3 years, Europe have not actually done any attempt to bring peace, but they still believe in their illusion that they can defeat Russia by military actions, which they have failed terribly. And their own people are actually even rising against them. And they are chanting they don't want their people to die in Ukraine for a war that should have never begun, and a war that is not even theirs. And they actually hold their leaders accountable, because if their leaders were not warmongers, if their leaders had respect treaties that NATO will not move inch close to Russia, we will not be where we are today. And Donald Trump and the team, for their first 100 days in the office, they have actually worked very, very hard to bring peace closer. And you can see Donald Trump is talking to the Russians. He's holding peace meetings with the Ukraine, just so that they can find a common ground to end this senseless war. And if you want to look at the facts on the ground, you could see that everyone is talking about peace, but nobody actually wants to initiate the peace process. Ukraine, on the other hand, just like they are requesting for a 30 days ceasefire, and the Russians are requesting a ceasefire, a 3-day ceasefire from the 8th of May to the 11th of May. And the funniest thing about this is that all of them, I know they will break the ceasefire agreement, though the Ukrainians have not officially endorsed the ceasefire. But fighting will continue to go on. My friend, I'll end here today, and I'll be bringing you updates on what goes on the peace on the peace meetings that are taking place. And may I equally remind you, we'll equally be reporting to you guys, because Trump gave us an hint that him and Putin might actually meet in Dubai somewhere around the 15th. So if you are new to this channel, please subscribe now, as we will be bringing you what will be unfolding concerning the Russia-Ukraine war. Thank you for listening. I love you. Bye bye till I see you in the next episode.